Hi, this is Kogito, and welcome to another Through the Ages video. Sorry for the relative, absence, but I'm back now, and here with a video about a brand new tournament, and a very interesting one, I think, called the Survivors Cup. So this tournament was just, earlier this year, created by Wolves. Thank you, Wolves. And it's a very interesting three-player game tournament. So you can see the rules here, but the way it works is you start with 3 lives, and you just play a bunch of 3-player games. And if you finish first, you keep your 3 lives. If you finish second, you lose 1 life. And if you finish third, you lose 2 lives. And if you time out, you're just out of the tournament. And as soon as you hit 0 lives or negative lives, you're out of the tournament. And so it just keeps going round after round, eliminating the people who are out of lives until we're left, I think the final is when you have 2 or 3 players left. There's a final round. But basically the idea is, you just... Again, it's you keep going. You obviously try to get first, but it's sort of double elimination. If you get last in one game, you're not eliminated yet, but it just means you have to keep getting first from then on. And if you get second, you have a little more leeway. So I thought this was a very interesting looking tournament. A lot of strong players are in the tournament, as you can see with a quick look at it, such as Weidenbaum, fellow YouTuber, a bunch of other strong players. So... including the reigning world champion, A440. So potentially I might be able to play some of those very strong players if I survive. Yeah, long enough in this tournament. This round I am playing against somewhat less well-known players, but still no one to take lightly. Obviously no one can be taken lightly. My opponents in the first round are Gens4 and L Tank. So you can see from the Gleeka ratings that I am certainly favored in this game, especially, L Tank is lower. However, like I said, no player can be taken lightly. We can see Gens, for example, has made as high a rank. I've actually been in Platinum once in Intermezzo, but I've spent kind of a lot of time in Gold over the past few seasons in Intermezzo and International, so as Gens. L Tank maybe looks like a newer player. Yeah, not nearly as many games played, which also could mean they're less experienced, but could also mean their skill hasn't been properly reflected in the Gleeka rating yet. So we'll see how both of my opponents play, and without further ado, let's take a look. In this game I'm playing first, and we can take a quick look at the leaders and wonders. So in Age 3, what most pops out to me are the theater synergy. We have Chaplin and Marlena, along with Hollywood. There's also theater leaders in Age 2 with Bach and Shakespeare. Darwin isn't a theater leader, but he works with libraries, which are good with Hollywood. So there's definitely some potential here for a theater-focused, culture production-focused strategy. Less synergy for labs in Age 3. Only Einstein, really. Marie Curie a little bit. There's no Space Force, or Manhattan Project as payoff, though. There's a Red Cross, at least. There's also Pierre, albeit with no internet, as well as Churchill with no Gandhi, so a military-focused strategy might also work. In Age 2, like I said, we have those culture leaders. We also have Robespierre, always important to pay attention to, as well as Watt. There's also Maria Theresa, extremely strong leader in a 3-player game, paired with the Ocean Liner service. In general, the Age 2 wonders are pretty good. We're missing Suez and Railroad, but we have Harvard College, Ocean Liner service. Statue of Liberty is also pretty good. Kremlin and Louvre can be good situationally. In Age 1, from my perspective, a lot of the leaders do like to be elected relatively early, especially Saladin, but also some of the others. So a transitional Age A leader might work here. The Age 1 wonders, like the Age 2 wonders, aren't as good as they could be, but they are pretty good. So skipping an Age A wonder can be viable here, as well as early Iron looks also good here for the wonders. As for me, I have somewhat of an interesting choice. I think these 2 yellow cards are low value and not really worth considering, so it's really between these 3 leaders. I think in a vacuum, perhaps Boudica is the best leader. The problem is, as you know, in a 3-player game, you have to take the military units with her if one other player is stronger than you. And the problem is we have Sun Tzu in the row. And not only is Sun Tzu in the row, I think he and Hammurabi are probably the 2 best leaders on the row. So I felt that if I took Boudica, there was an extremely strong chance Gens would take Sun Tzu, probably because Sun Tzu is strong. There's no Suez for Sun Tzu, unfortunately, but there is a Ziska synergy. And I just felt that with me taking Boudica, that would be a lot of incentive for Gens to take Sun Tzu to punish my Boudica. with L Tank then taking Hammurabi. And, you know, it's not the end of the world if you have Boudica against an AJ leader with strength, you know, because the first turn you have to build military, but maybe the second turn maybe it can be okay, depending on how things go. But it's just a situation I don't like very much. I've seen it kind of turn out badly pretty often. You often have to do relatively suboptimal moves with her in order to actually get, like, good Boudica businesses going. It's not really a situation I wanted to interact with, so that's why I passed off Boudica. Cleopatra, I think, can often be a fine leader. The problem is Roman roads may very well not be on the row. If I click Cleopatra, a good chance one of my opponents takes it. And taking Cleopatra without knowing that you'll have an AJ wonder is not a situation I wanted to be in. So for that reason, I took Ashoka. Ashoka can definitely be a really tricky leader to use well, but he can definitely be high upside. There's unfortunately not a lot of great Age 1 leaders you might want to keep in your hand for a while with him. So that's a downside with him in this deck. But I just felt that Boudica and Cleopatra were not good in this particular situation. And Ashoka was sort of the best of bad options in a sense. Jens takes Aristotle, not Sun Tzu. I probably would have taken Sun Tzu, but maybe I'm pretty high on Sun Tzu and relatively low on Aristotle. I think Aristotle's also a fine leader. And L Tank takes Roman roads. I think this makes sense. No need to take Hammurabi now, because both of their opponents have taken leaders already, so might as well just take the high value wonder. Probably, yeah, you know, maybe Pyramids, Library could come out, but Roman roads is high value. Don't know if an opponent might take it, so I agree with this. Age 1 begins. Library and Acropolis actually come out. I don't want to take either of them for 3 civil actions, though. So instead I do typical things of building a mine, increasing my population. Now, this next move, on the other hand, I think is, well, okay. I end up taking the stockpile here. So I think that, you know, I wanted to have just a yellow card in my hand for Ashoka. Obviously, you know, I have 1 civil action left. I could have taken the Engineering Genius, and that is something I heavily considered. However, there is one major reason I took the stockpile. Well, there's a couple reasons. One reason is that when you have Ashoka, you need to be super careful with your civil actions. Because it can be so difficult getting out of corruption, you need every civil action you can get to make sure you're out of corruption with Ashoka. So doing a civil action and efficient play, like taking an Engineering Genius for 2, is a lot worse with Ashoka than I think with any other AJ leader, except maybe Alexander, but I think even more so than Alexander. But there's another reason I took Stockpile, and specific, and this is also why I took Stockpile, not the Rich Land, which may be a better one, which has to do with the Library. So, like I said, he doesn't want to take the Library for 3 civil actions. I think that's just way too much. But I do think the Library is better than the Acropolis. Now, this is actually a pretty good Acropolis deck. Like I said, pointed out previously, we have a lot of theater synergy in this deck, and I think in a 3-player game, an Acropolis can definitely be a strong strategy. I think cultural-focused strategies work significantly better in 3-player than in 4-player. Obviously, they work best in 2-player, but I think they still work pretty good in 3-player. So Acropolis would not be terrible to get. However, I do think that Library is just a level above. And by taking the Stockpile, I leave the Library on 3 civil actions, meaning that it's very likely that Jens won't take the Library. I also think the Library probably pairs better with Aristotle than Acropolis does, so there's also a bit of denial there. But like I said, the point is I keep the Library now in 3 civil actions for Jens, meaning they very likely will not take it, and I'll be able to get the Library. As I think Library is probably a bit better with Ashoka than Acropolis, because you get to keep extra cards in hand and more science to play text with. So that's why I took the Stockpile. I drew 2 bonus cards. Jens takes Aristotle, builds a mine. Could have taken the Engineering Genius, but chooses not to. Instead, they take the Frugality. I think this is justifiable from a civil action efficiency perspective. However, it does mean that L Tank will be able to get both Hammurabi and the Engineering Genius. Engineering Genius is always really good, but it's especially really good with the Roman roads, because it guarantees that you'll be able to finish the Roman roads on age 3. So I think perhaps Jens should have taken the Engineering Genius, both because it's good for them, but mainly as a denial to L Tank. L Tank, of course, does do that, the play I stated previously, so this is definitely looking like a really strong start for L Tank. L Tank probably has the best start of the game of all 3 players. I can't seed. I do take the library over the Acropolis. As stated previously, I think even though Acropolis is better than it usually is in this particular deck, I still think library is a step beyond it. The question is what else to take. I want to take one of these tech cards to get the Ashoka bonus going. The question is which one. I think probably not cartography, especially with no Suez. So it really comes down to one of these three: masonry, irrigation, code of laws. I think a case can definitely be made for any of them. I end up, however, taking the masonry. I just think that such an early masonry here is extremely strong. It should probably save me a civil action on the library already, and because I obviously haven't built any urban buildings yet, it could potentially save me a lot of rocks on my urban buildings. So while, like I said, I do think an early irrigation can definitely be good, early code of laws can definitely be good, I feel like masonry is maybe the most powerful tech to get so early. It's at least really close, and I think more powerful than irrigation, and maybe code of laws. Code of laws is also obviously really strong to get early, but it also costs one more civil actions, so that's why I ended up taking masonry. Another reason to take masonry is that there's a Silk Road in the deck, and it's obviously very strong with Silk Road. It's also strong with Great Wall. As for my last civil action, I end up building a lab, so this does cost me an idle worker. However, El Tank has Hammurabi, so lower chances than usual to have drawn an event. So I can always choose not to seed if I don't want to. Gens, you know, might seed, but basically because El Tank has Hammurabi and I'm playing first, there's less odds than there usually are that the development of religion or warfare will be revealed on my turn. In addition, with Ashoka and with the stockpile, potentially I have a bit of extra rocks already. What I really want is some science, even with the library, because I want, again, with Ashoka, you want to be able to cycle those texts in and out of your hand. So that's why I decided to build the lab here and risk missing out on a development. I draw at a kidnap and an uncertain borders. Jones takes the Acropolis, builds a second lab, and takes the Code of Laws. I think that makes sense. I also did, incidentally, want to plan a way to leave the Code of Laws on 2 civil actions for gens, though it wasn't very hard to do that on that turn. L-Tank finishes the Roman roads and gets the breakthrough for 1 civil action, so another very strong turn for L-Tank. On my turn, so neither of my opponents actually seeded. However, I decide to seed the Uncertain Borders. Certainly, I am risking a development of religion or warfare coming out. However, you know, there is at least P in the deck, making religion slightly less value than it usually is. And again, as Ashoka, I'll have a bit of excess rocks anyway, especially with the masonry. So I think the main reason I seeded, though, is because if a rock event was revealed, that would let me finish the library this turn. And then play the masonry, finish the library, and, you know, take one of these cards. That felt like a potentially extremely strong turn for me that I wanted to give myself the potential of. I, however, don't reveal rock events. Instead, I reveal the development of civil life, which I used to increase my population and not to play a card because this turn I'm not building the library, so I just wanted to keep the masonry in my hand for Ashoka. The question is which card to take with Ashoka, and I end up taking the irrigation. Let's see what I do on my turn first. Let's see what I do first. I take the engineering genius. Also, very strong card to take for 1 civil action. It's a little sad with the masonry and the library because I can't use this efficiently in the library while also finishing it in 2 civil actions with masonry. So that's a bit of a shame. That said, it's still, in general, obviously a very powerful card to have, especially for 1 civil action. So that's why I took it. I can then increase my population to get rid of corruption, and then just build 1 station of the library. Whether I'm going to finish it with masonry or the engineering genius, this is just a civil action efficient way to do it. So yeah, I think the rest of this turn, you know, the engineering genius is, you know, maybe not the best. It's a bit of a speculative card for sure, but you know, it definitely has a lot of potential for me. So I think this is very defensible. Again, just a very strong card. The irrigation, though, I want to talk about. So the major reason I took the irrigation, like I said, I wanted a 3rd color in my hand for Ashoka, obviously, and the irrigation I just felt, you know, was an upgrade building I could start working on this turn, next turn potentially, or the turn after that. There's there is Statue of Liberty and Ocean Liner service to pair with the irrigation, so some irrigation synergy. Yanziska I'm probably not going to get. There's no Barbarossa, unfortunately, so not the... Or Machu Picchu, so not the most irrigation synergy there could be, but still a decent amount. However, I do think that on my turn, I didn't consider the drama closely enough. As stated previously, there's a lot of theater synergy in this deck. And so I think that the drama has a very high potential. Now, it might not be something I play for a few turns, whereas the irrigation, maybe I'll play earlier. So I think there is definitely still a case to be made for irrigation. But looking back on it, I think that, like I said, there's enough drama synergy that this is that I definitely didn't consider this maybe as strongly as I should have. Especially since I have other things I can do with my resources other than irrigation. Next turn, maybe I want to finish library. The turn after that, maybe I'll have... probably not this copy of iron, but I might have something else I can spend my resources on. Maybe I'll need to start putting into the military or something. So it's actually not clear that irrigations will be upgraded anytime soon either. And so with that being the case, maybe taking the high value drama, or, you know, the long-term upside of drama might have been better, especially since there's also a St. Peter's Basilica in the deck. So it's not entirely clear to me now whether drama would have been better because, like I said, it's more long-term and this is potentially more immediate. But I think it might have actually been better. I think if I had an Acropolis, then drama definitely would have been the take here. With library, it's a lot closer. Anyway, I draw a plunder and a naval trade agreement. Jens doesn't see it again, instead takes the iron. Increase the population a couple of times, and also takes the bread and circuses a little bit early for the bread and circuses, not knowing if development of religion is in the deck. On the other hand, it is a tech for one civil action to take with Aristotle. Again, with as stated on my turn, since Jens does have the Acropolis, I think probably the drama, given this deck, would have been a better happy face solution than the bread and circuses, like I said, especially with Acropolis. Tank Seeds reveals the development of markets. Tank takes Ziska for one civil action. Strong leader does elect him this turn though. This I'm kind of questionable of. You know, the event deck isn't gonna flip at least for the next turn cycle, potentially for more. So again, Ziska isn't really gonna give a whole lot of value except for the extra military action for at least the next turn, if not more. And I think the extra civil action from Hammurabi right now would be a lot more valuable to L-Tank than the extra military action. I guess 2 extra military actions given by Ziska. So I think L-Tank should have waited at least 1 turn to play Ziska. Anyway, L-Tank does take a swordsman, perhaps suggesting there's an infantry tactic. One upside of electing Ziska this turn, though, is it does mean L-Tank is able to take the Taj Mahal for free. I've talked about the Taj Mahal in a previous video, but basically to summarize, I've gained a lot more respect for the Taj Mahal recently. I think it's not that bad, and I think it's especially pretty good when you get it for free like this. Now that being said, there are other strong AJ wonders left in the deck, especially Great Wall might be very strong for L-Tank with the swordsman. So I think the Taj is hardly necessary for L-Tank right now, and so given that L-Tank had to give up Hammurabi in order to take the Taj for free, maybe it wasn't worth it in the end. They end their turn by taking an alchemy for potential upgrades next turn. I offered the naval trade agreement, so with my turn, I'm actually going to be out of corruption, and we'll see I'm actually going to replace Ashoka this turn. We'll talk about that in a bit. So I decided to try getting the colonization bonus instead. I thought maybe offering it to Jens would work because Jens has 2 military actions, whereas L-Tank had 3. So maybe Jens had less hope of winning colonies anyway and would let me have it. They do end up rejecting it, though. I think the way I offered this was kind of a mistake overall. First of all, given their current corruption situation, L-Tank probably was more likely to accept the pact than Jens was, because it would make it a lot easier for L-Tank to get out of corruption, potentially. So that's one issue with it. Another issue with it is the blue tokens could potentially still be very viable to me, even though I will have a way to get out of corruption this turn. Still having extra blue tokens is nice. I do have the 2 bonus cards in my hand, of course, but I haven't drawn any colonies yet. So perhaps letting one of my opponents, especially, you know, gens, maybe doesn't, with 2 military actions won't draw that many bonus cards. Maybe letting gens have the 1 colonization bonus wouldn't be such a big deal, whereas the extra 2 blue tokens could definitely make my turns a lot more flexible. So I think, basically, if I wanted the colonization bonus, I should have offered it to L-Tank, and maybe getting the blue tokens would have been even better than the colonization bonus. So I think I kind of just made a mistake with this in every way. Anyway, on my turn I wanted to finish the library. I could do it with the engineering genius, but I decided to save the civil action by doing it with masonry instead. We'll see what I end up spending the civil action on. One civil action, I decide to take the Saladin, extremely powerful leader, available for me for 1 civil action. Felt right. I do notably decide to play him this turn, though. I didn't have to. I could have just kept him in my hand and then increased my population like this to get out of corruption. So that's why I did it this way, because it would have been, I think, a lot harder for me to get out of corruption by doing it with engineering genius. Anyway, though, I could have kept Saladin in my hand at least for 1 turn to get another Ashoka bonus going. I think I just was feeling like this this civil action crunch at the time, so I kind of just wanted the civil action. But I think looking back on this in retrospect, the 1 rock and the 1 food from Ashoka is probably slightly better than the civil action if you think about it. It's kind of like a stockpile that you don't have to spend a civil action to play, or it's sort of like a rich land or an urban growth that's more flexible. Maybe something like that, which is really good, especially in Age 1. I think, you know, obviously Richland or Urban Growth, just taking them for 1 civil action is itself, like, pretty good, and doing it with the Ashoka bonus, like I said, so choosing the Ashoka bonus for 1 civil action is basically like taking a Richland for 1 civil action, except it's more flexible, obviously, because the Richland has to be used on Mines or Farms, whereas the Ashoka bonus can be used on anything. So yeah, I think I should have kept Ashoka around for at least 1 more turn. That was another mistake. I kind of just made a lot of mistakes this turn, unfortunately. I do think that finishing library was right, though. Keep the naval trade agreement around just in case. Trade routes agreement and a knowledge of the ancients. Gens doesn't see it again. Instead, they take the monarchy, getting another science with Aristotle, and do some mine upgrades along with taking the irrigation, getting another science with Aristotle. So Gens is at least making... Gens has gotten 5 science off of Aristotle so far. That's definitely a pretty nice amount. I think also doesn't see it. Instead, they finished the Taj Mahal notably instead of doing lab upgrades. I think that they should have been out of corruption. So this costs 8. Yeah, so they would have been out of corruption even if they had done 2 alchemy upgrades instead. And especially with them taking the Code of Laws for an extra science cost. Now, it's true that they do have the breakthrough to offset that science a little bit. Still, though, I think that this early in the game, 2 science is substantially better than 3 culture. So I think L-Tank should have prioritized the alchemy over the Taj Mahal this turn. But it is definitely a sign that L-Tank values pushing culture hard, at least in 3-player games, which is interesting. And they play a Legion to get a bit of extra strength and also get even more culture production going. Might also be a sign that perhaps cultural heritage has been ceded. I have a Traders Agreement. I wanted to use 1 rock as 1 food during my turn, because that would let me increase my population and make it a lot easier to get out of corruption. It would make my turn a lot cleaner. I felt that Gens having upgraded the 2 mines already and not having that much food, maybe Gens wasn't too interested in using food as resources, whereas L-Tank having a lot of food saved up, and, you know, having an extra rock income from the Roman roads, but still not having the iron yet, might have been more willing to, might have wanted more to use food as rocks. So that's why I offered the pack to L-Tank. Unfortunately, L-Tank did refuse. I think, again, maybe this turn, because, you know, my opponents probably could see that, like, using rocks as food this turn would be really good for me, that, maybe it would have been better to offer the naval trade agreement. Maybe that's something that they would have been more interested in, to give myself the blue cubes. So I think that was probably a mistake by me, although that one's a lot more hard to say. Packs are kind of a tricky subject in general, because it also depends on what your opponent likes to do and what your opponent values. And what you value and what you think your opponent should value, what your opponent actually values, are often very different things, so packs are kind of just tricky in general. Anyway, with me having the Masonry and me being on Bronze Mines for a while, I felt that Silk Road just seemed like the strongest wonder possible for me right now in this situation. Unfortunately, it is a somewhat substantial civil action cost, and might make it hard for me to get out of Corruption. I end up getting out of Corruption for building a Warrior, and then I just build one stage of the Silk Road to be civil action efficient. I took the Alchemy. My logic was basically, obviously, like, alchemies are really cheap with the Masonry, so that just felt strong. However, well, I guess this is a bit of a spoiler as to how the game might go, but it's actually going to end up being a long time before I upgrade the alchemies. I think it kind of makes sense to why, because, you know, I also have the irrigations I want to upgrade. The Silk Road is going to cost a lot of rocks. One reason not to take the Silk Road, of course, is that it's not too good with the engineering genius, but I felt that, you know, I could use the engineering genius on an H2 wonder. Another reason to take the Silk Road is because it is really good with the stockpile. Anyway, though, what I was saying is that the alchemy, you know, maybe, like, my rocks are going to have to spend rocks in military soon, Silk Road, irrigation. It might be hard to get alchemies going in the near future. On the other hand, though, I didn't want to build this huge Silk Road because I can build 2 with the Masonry. So what else am I going to spend this civil action on? That's one reason I really would have liked the Trade Routes Agreement. Maybe I could spend the civil action on taking one of these cards, especially with Silk Road. More yellow cards is nice. I think both Frugality and Cultural Heritage could potentially, you know, obviously Cultural Heritage gets the double bonus from Silk Road. So maybe Cultural Heritage instead of Alchemy could have been considered. But that's also, like I said, this is spoilers how the game will go, but it's also speaking with hindsight bias because I know that this alchemy is gonna sit in my hand for a long time. So there's definitely a possible world where things could have gone differently, and I would have been able to upgrade the alchemies a lot quicker, and they would have been useful. So that might just be hindsight bias saying I do think with Masonry, alchemy is always like a strong card, sort of inherently. So yeah. Anyway, since my opponents didn't seem like they wanted to accept packs from me, I decided to go ahead and discard my packs, and I drew a Fighting Band. Jens takes Michelangelo. Definitely seems like a good leader for Jens with these iron upgrades already having commenced. The extra civil action to take more to build wonders with. There's also 2 happy face wonders on the row, which gives a bit of extra culture with Michelangelo. So I think that is good. And they just finish Acropolis and then take the breakthrough in the Frugality. So I like this turn from Jens. It does stick them with a lot of cards in the hand, though. Maybe instead of, let's see, they had 2 rocks after finishing their Acropolis. So maybe instead of taking these 2 cards, they could have played irrigation, upgraded the farm. That could have been considered. On the other hand, the breakthrough is obviously a very strong card. Jens, it looks like science would be somewhat of an issue for them, especially with these texts in their hand they might want to play. So the breakthrough does make a lot of sense. So I think this play is also good. Tank Seeds reveals the development of trade routes. This turn upgrades a lab as well as plays Code of Laws. Builds a warrior, gets out of corruption, and then takes patriotism. This, I think, maybe, I mean, it is true that this means that L-Tank gets even more food by staying out of consumption. And then patriotism, I mean, it's an okay card, but it's not, you know, the most exciting card, yellow card to take, for sure. But it does, it kind of is 1 civil action for 2 rocks and 1 food, because the alternative would have been popping this turn. So I do see the logic in it. I guess they increased the population anyway, though. So yeah, maybe being more civil action efficient and increasing the population a second time could have been considered. I see the knowledge of the ancients. I think that yeah, I think again I was looking for rocks maybe to finish the Silk Road this turn. Fortunately, I didn't get them. Yeah. Well, okay, I can still finish the Silk Road this turn, but I decide that I don't want to because the event deck is about to flip, and I thought it was more important to build up a strength a little. especially with me having seeded the uncertain borders previously. I didn't want, you know, Jen's seeds, L-Tank seeds, uncertain borders is revealed while I'm weakest. That's not a situation I wanted to be in. So I decided to go ahead and build a swordsman. And then play fighting band, making me strongest. And then to get out of corruption, I can upgrade a farm and increase my population. After building the swordsman, I had 2 rocks left, which is why I upgraded the farm. This does, however, mean that the downside of this is it means that I can't play the stockpile because the age is going to end. I couldn't find a turn where I could play the stockpile and avoid corruption, unfortunately. We can see, again, if I had had the extra 2 blue cubes from the... from whatever that pact is. If I had the extra 2 blue cubes, then I definitely could have played the stockpile instead of doing one of these other things. So that previous decision is definitely coming back to bite me here. Doing it this way also means that I probably won't be able to finish the Silk Road this turn. So maybe instead of upgrading the mine, I could have increased my population again. But that also would have left me with another server action to use. I didn't really want the nice without a nice tactic. Maybe I could have taken the urban growth. I had the hand size for that. So yeah, maybe prioritizing the Silk Road over the farm upgrade was better, especially since, again, there are these good H2 leader wonders, especially the Ocean Liner service. So perhaps prioritizing Silk Road over farms would have been better for me. On the other hand, it's a little bit of late in H1 anyway. The longer you wait, especially with irrigations, I think the worse they get. So there's definitely also a strong argument to be made to get the farm income going earlier so I can get more population out. I think it's debatable. Jones doesn't see it instead, but they do take the Knights, and they take St. Peter's Basilica instead of Great Wall, but we can see that Jens is actually going to build 2 Knights this turn, strongly suggesting that Jens has a heavy cavalry tactic. And with the heavy cavalry tactic, I agree that the Basilica is probably better than the Great Wall. Because obviously heavy cavalry only takes cavalry, which Great Wall doesn't help with, and they get out of corruption by increasing their population. So I do like this turn from Jens. They also become strongest. Age 2 begins. I have to discard my stockpile, sadly. It would have been very nice to play with Silk Road, but it wasn't to be. L-Tank Seeds reveals the development of science, and the event deck finally flips pretty late, because Jens hadn't seeded at all, mainly. L-Tank plays the patriotism, gets some use out of it to become strongest, actually, and also takes an urban growth to help with the second lab upgrade. Now that we're at the beginning of Age 2, we can take a quick look at the overall situation. So L-Tank, thanks to Zizka and also that early Taj Mahal, L-Tank is currently ahead in culture and will get ahead more as the turns go on. Not that much yet, though, we can see, but the lead will increase. And notably, even though L-Tank did delay the lab upgrades, they still got them before either of the opponents did. So L-Tank did not really sacrifice that much economy-wise. They have the 5th civil action. They have the 4 science income, more than either of the opponents. Jens has Michelangelo, plus more rock income than either of their opponents. We'll start getting some culture going with the St. Peter's and Michelangelo as well. My major benefit, I would say, is I think I have the best wonders, at least in a vacuum, out of all my opponents. I also obviously have these farm upgrades going, so kind of neat how I have the farm upgrades, Jens has the rock upgrades, L-Tank has the lab upgrades right now. Civil military action situation looking basically the same for everyone. So I'd say right now this game looks pretty even. I think L-Tank did have the strongest first couple turns, which they parlayed to probably the best position overall, just because the economies seem relatively even, and L-Tank is going to have the culture lead. However, I and Jen certainly both also have strengths to our position, so I'd say right now it's an extremely even game. I can't seed. Instead, I increase my population. Now, this turn I think I make another mistake, so we'll see what I do. Instead of upgrading alchemies, I actually play the bread and circuses. The major reason, I think, was because I was worried about rebellion, with me having 3 unhappy workers. Obviously, if a rebellion is revealed, that would be probably just straight up lose me the game. On the other hand, I think maybe what I neglected to consider properly is that none of the cards in this deck were seeded by gens. Every one of them was seeded by me and L-Tank, and L-Tank we can see has 2 unhappy workers and hasn't made much of an effort to get happy faces. So for that reason, I could perhaps conclude that Rebellion is an extremely unlikely event to be in this deck, so I didn't really need to prepare for it. Now, it is true that building this arena is able to get me an additional strength, but I also could have gotten this additional strength by upgrading another warrior. Now, the arena does make this pop happy, so it can potentially let me get a 4th population into military. So that's one more long-term benefit for the arena. However, I think in the short term, like I said, the reason I really wanted to play it this turn was worries about Rebellion. I think in retrospect, I didn't actually have to be worried about Rebellion. So perhaps upgrading the Alchemy this turn instead would have been better, because that will give me more immediate value. I do, however, take the reserves, mainly because that will potentially allow me to finish the Silk Road next turn. And I draw an Annex. Not a suitable event, sadly. Gens builds an arena themselves, taking care of their happiness problem, and also getting some science with Michelangelo. It also makes them tight in strength. We are all actually 7 strength right now. And they take, and after working on the civilization, they take a rich land for some farm upgrades down the line. L-Tank Seeds reveals to develop territory. At least I'm able to win this territory fairly easily thanks to my bonus cards. The science, since I need an Age 2 government, I can definitely use as much science as I can get, especially with my labs being delayed even as I have science wonders. L-Tank, I passed up the iron. I think it was on 3 civil actions for me, and yeah, I was actually on 2 civil actions for me, but I went with the Beneficus instead. Maybe taking the iron would have been better, but it's also going to be a relatively late iron. I have other things I can spend my rocks on with the Alchemy and the Silk Road. So in my position, it might just be better to wait for coal regardless. L-Tank, though, is happy to get their minor crews going, as well as a lab with their urban growth. And finally, they take the drama. As I pointed out previously, this is a good deck for drama, so that makes sense. They also become strongest by upgrading their last warrior. It's my turn. I can't see if I wanted to. This, however, is another pretty difficult turn with a lot of potential things I can do. However, I decided that the best thing I could do would be to take the strategy. What happened? Oh, the developed territory also helped me with my happy faces. Thanks to the yellow token. Anyway, I thought, since I know that the Uncertain Borders is in the deck, I really didn't want to be weakest. And if I just rebuilt the Swordsman, I would only be at 7 strength, so I would still be weakest after my turn. So I figured that that made this strategy justifiable, even though it is a significant science cost with me still being on Despotism. Definitely would have been nice. I was unfortunately exactly 1 science short of getting the playing the Kanmon this turn, which I would have really, really liked to do. So me having delayed the Silk Road and the labs for other things coming back to bite me there. But I do think the strategy is good for me because it does allow me to become strongest after my turn, merely by upgrading the second warrior, leaving me with 2 ox left that I can use to finish upgrading my farms, which I think is probably right to do, especially since I can still potentially finish the Silk Road next turn with reserves. Fortunately, we can start to see that alchemy sitting in my hand for a while. But by playing the turn this way, even though it will delay my next government form for a while, again, with me knowing Uncertain Borders is in the deck, I just felt that being strongest after my turn, it was the only feasible way to avoid being weakest after my turn too. So I think that was probably the right play in the end. And I took rich land because obviously I'm going to be on coals, so that it'll help me a lot with those coal upgrades, especially with Silk Road. The strategy also lets me finally draw 3 cards a turn. This turn I draw a developed territory and a bonus card for potentially letting me win this territory, as well as a very strong tactic for me that I was happy to see the defensive army. Gens finishes the St. Peter's Basilica and now has 7 culture production with Michelangelo. That's certainly a lot. They also take the Kanmon, interestingly, even though they had taken the monarchy previously. However, it is true that the monarchy would be late at this point, even if they played it this turn. And thanks to Acropolis, they just have to build a second urban building next turn, and they'll be able to play the Kanmon along with the breakthrough to help with that science cost. So I think this definitely does make sense. I'll tank Seeds. Reveals a cultural influence, which helps my opponents more than me. Tank takes a selective breeding that Gens had passed up to do their turn. Definitely a good card for both of them. They also take a Cavalryman for some more tactics. And they choose to upgrade the farm instead of the mine, but that makes sense because that'll give them 4 food next turn, with which they can use to maybe build another unit if they decide they want to. And with their last civil action, they take a plus Frugality for even more food. Passing up the journalism for that notably. I'm strong as I want to seed. I have the bonus card in my hand. So yeah, just hitting the develop seems definitely right. I reveal a vast territory. I'm pretty sure this one I was willing to go all in on. Definitely a very strong territory. Unfortunately, I end up having to put both of my units into it, which will make it which will delay my Silk Road a lot because now I'm going to have to rebuild military. Maybe for that reason I should have considered not putting as much because, well, obviously the vast is a very good territory. It's also going to delay my civilization by quite a bit since I have to rebuild my military. I also obviously know the developed territory is coming eventually, though at least I'm able to save my bonus card from going off to that, so I can keep my bonus card for the developed territory. On the other hand, especially with me being on irrigations, vast could be an extremely important territory to keep my population going into the late game. So I think it is probably still worth winning it, even though because it delays my economy so much, it's pretty close. Maria, though, because I have so much food saved up, and she's just a very strong leader and 3-player in general, I wanted to take full 1 civil action. It also felt like, I mean, James Watt could be alright, but I ordered my farms. I mean, he can definitely just be good on coals, but I also have rich land plus Silk Roads. I wasn't too worried about getting coal upgrades done quickly. I wasn't, you know, Napoleon could be fine. Maybe Darwin. Maybe Bach if I can get operas with him. Robespierre potentially could be extremely strong, although he's not at yet, so the timing would kind of have to line up. But I think Maria is just a very strong leader in 3-player, and she's available for me for 1 civil action right now, so I wanted to take her. I do also decide to, we'll see after I rebuild. I know there's an uncertain borders in the deck, so I definitely don't want to be weakest. And there's a coal on the row right now that I can take. Kinda, you know, since my opponents both have iron, I didn't necessarily need to take the coal, but I felt that it was probably, they were probably going to force it to fall off. I didn't, especially if I took like the efficient upgrade instead. I think I actually end up taking the efficient upgrade anyway, so yeah, the coal I think would have definitely fallen off if I hadn't taken it, and who knows when the second copy will come out. That might be the end of the age, so it just felt like taking it now would be best, even though it is somewhat of a civil action cost still. I decided to elect Maria this turn. A little bit questionable with me going into 4 civil actions. That extra civil action definitely could have been extremely helpful. But it does mean I get the Maria bonus immediately next turn. I thought that, you know, chances were pretty reasonable, especially, you know, Gens kind of tipped their hand that they have heavy cavalry. So Gens might get stronger than me next turn, and then the extra rocks from Maria could be extremely valuable. So I think there's definitely reason to elect Maria this turn too, but losing on the civil action is also pretty painful, so it's kind of debatable, I guess. Yeah, I think it's debatable. I draw historic territory and a scientific cooperation. Gens builds a second arena so they can play their Kanmon, which makes sense. It also puts them up to 10 culture production with Michelangelo. That's a lot. Gens, unfortunately means that Gens has to disband a unit of warriors wanted to get their 3rd knights for the heavy cavalry tactic, but at least they do, thus making them the strongest now. And they take a cannon, as well as finally upgrading 1 farm. It takes a rifleman 2, so they have all 3 types of military technology, and they have access to right now. So overall, this seems like a good turn. I think does not see they're the weakest. Instead, they take a team sports to help both with their strength and with their happy face situation. Building a 4th swordsman also helps with their strength. I am now they're now the 2nd strongest. And after taking the efficient upgrade for, you know, the upgrades they have to do, they preemptively play the team sports to be civil action efficient. Passing up the riflemen to do that, notably. I tried offering the Scientific Cooperation Pact. Obviously, I'll have more science income than it seems with Maria, but I felt with El Tank having 5 science production, it seemed like a pretty decent chance they would be willing to accept the Scientific Cooperation. Unfortunately, they rejected that. My opponents are 3 for 3 in rejecting the pacts I've offered this game, sadly. This turn is also kind of an unfortunate one. So I think this is the second, this is the second copy of cannons. My only tactic is the defensive army, so I really, really want these cannons. However, let's see, what else do I want? Yeah, I also, because I know there's the uncertain borders in the deck, I also want to make sure I'm not weakest after my turn. And the only way to not be weakest after my turn is to increase my population twice and build 2 more swordsmen. Which is not a terrible thing to do with the defensive army, but it does mean that I have to that I can't upgrade my mine this turn. I maybe could have considered, maybe I could have upgraded the mine, and I accepted the loss of the yellow token, but I felt especially with Maria, and also, you know, there's red cross on the deck too. Yellow tokens felt very valuable for me, so I just thought it would be better to do it like this. Another benefit of this is it leaves me with a civil action left open to take the cannons that I definitely will need. So, kind of a disappointing turn on a number of levels, you could say, but it was probably still right just because of the importance of the things that I did. I draw a Crime Wave and a Conquistadors that I won't use. Gen Siege reveals the knowledge of the ancients on certain borders is I also knew this was in the deck too, obviously. And sadly, Uncertain Borders is the bottom card of this event deck. Gen 6 is journalism for potentially even more culture, finishes upgrading their farms, and with a 3rd farm for more population, as well as taking a revolutionary idea. This definitely makes sense. Science is their weak point, and they also have a bunch of text they want to play. I do think the journalism is good. They're gonna have the population for it with the 3 farms, and it'll help them with their science. So that makes sense. There's also, we saw previously, Hollywood. In the deck, El Tank takes care of the happy face problem by running a team sports. They also upgrade a mine, becoming tied with me for strongest. They take the wave of nationalism. They're definitely pretty short on rocks right now, so they could really use this wave. They also take a republic to get a government form going next turn, and they increase the population. It's my turn. I'm strongest. I know that's Uncertain Borders, so I wanted to siege. I decided to siege the territory because I have Maria. And Maria obviously makes it a lot easier to rebuild after winning territories. Crime Wave, I mean, probably I should be able to not be weakest, but it's also a relatively low impact event. So I decided to see the higher impact event. Reveal that Uncertain Borders. I have to finish the Silk Road this turn, or the age is going to end. And sadly, the only way to do that is to use my Engineering Genius, which is also going to be discarded after this turn if I don't use it, on a 1-rock stage of the Silk Road. I have to use it on a 1-rock stage because if I use it on the 2-rock stage, I would be in corruption. I could increase my population, but I really want to take the 2nd copy of Kanmon instead. So I kind of had to do it this way. So I guess it is true that the Engineering Genius is what allows me to finish the Silk Road this turn. So in that sense, it was helpful. But in a more fundamental sense, where it not only gave me 1 rock, it also cost me a civil action because I can't build 2 stages with the masonry. Definitely, the Engineering Genius didn't work out the way I hoped it would, to say the least. But I definitely do think the Kanmon is important to finally get a government form going for me next turn. It does have finishing the Silk Road does mean I delayed the mine upgrades even more, but I think it was necessary to do. Discard that tactic I won't use, and I draw another bonus card, anti-terrorism. This is definitely a lucky draw for me. Certainly seems like I'm going to be the lowest in culture of all my opponents. As well as another tactic I won't use. Gens takes an architecture and the ocean liner service. Plays the architecture, definitely strong with the ocean liner service and the journalism. It does cost them even more science though, so they have to be careful about their science. And they build 3 sieges of the ocean liner service, as well as take reserves for even more rocks. L-Tank Seeds reveals the border conflict. Unfortunately, L-Tank, I could have really used those rocks, but L-Tank gets them instead. I did not have knowledge of that event, though. L-Tank takes Bach, useful with their dramas. They develop the Republic peacefully. It's given them a lot of civil actions, at least, however, they are on 2 military actions. We'll talk about that in a bit. They build the drama with Bach, giving them more culture, as well as finish upgrading their mines. Building the drama does, however, mean they're delaying their farm upgrade 1 turn. I think, obviously, they needed to play the drama this turn, so it won't be discarded. But maybe instead of building one, it could have been better to upgrade a farm instead. They did build it directly, yeah. So I think it would have been better to upgrade a farm this turn instead. With their last civil action, they choose to take the justice system. Kind of a bad card for them, but I guess they didn't really have anything else to do with that civil action. That urban growth was taken this turn, yeah. So, I mean, they could have, I guess, what did they spend their science on? Oh yeah, Republic and then drama. Yeah. Honestly, though, with how useless the justice system is going to be for them, maybe just floating that last civil action would have been better for them in this situation. Something to consider, at least. Age 3 begins, and we can take a quick look at the overall situation. So, unsurprisingly, my opponents, thanks to their culture leaders and the Wonders, have a significant culture lead over me at the moment. They both have more than 30 culture than me. Gens did lose Michelangelo, so they don't have the culture production going yet, at least. Although it looks like they're pretty well set up for Darwin, so Darwin will give them more culture soon. L-Tank has 10 culture production going with Box and Taj Mahal, so that's definitely quite a lot. So I'm definitely going to be in catch-up mode regarding my culture. Question is, do I have enough to compensate for it? And the answer is probably not really. My science production isn't too impressive. I never had the chance to build my alchemies, and I ended up discarding them to the end of the age. So I'm actually only tied on science production with L-Tank. Science, however, is the biggest weak point of Gens right now. My rocks are also buying both my opponents. I will be able to upgrade my mines cheaply in the next couple turns, but they will be extremely late coal mines, so that's not too exciting. My biggest strength is definitely my food right now. I have a lot of food saved up and also Maria, so that could definitely be pretty strong. But still gonna be definitely not gonna be enough to make up for that 30 culture at least. And Gens, despite having the weakness in science, does have this powerful ocean liner service window they're about to complete. L-Tank doesn't have anything particularly great going economically, but also nothing bad. A relatively well-balanced situation along with that culture lead. And obviously both my opponents, I mean, I'm going to get the Kanman this turn, but like, my opponents haven't really sacrificed their civil actions either. I would say if Gens' biggest weakness is their science, L-Tank's biggest weakness is definitely their military actions. They're really going to want that military theory soon. So my opponents definitely have some weak points that can potentially exploit, whereas I at least don't have any huge glaring weak points, at least not after I finish upgrading my mines. That being said, I'd say that I don't have quite enough to compensate me for the culture deficit just yet, I would say. So I think I am probably in the worst position at the moment, but it's definitely far from over. 30 culture is a relatively substantial amount, and it's going to grow, but it's certainly not insurmountable in age 3. So I definitely will have chances, but I can't just win this game by like coasting. I'm going to need to like figure out how the best ways for me to get culture and take them. Like, I'm gonna have to be very deliberate with how I play age 3, I think, if I want to win this game. I do see terrorism, though. Seems like it'll be good for me. And I reveal my developed territory that I am at least able to win for pretty cheap, only 1 unit, so I was happy about that. It does, of course, mean I'll have to rebuild, which after playing Kanman, at least I can finally start upgrading my mines this turn. I'd waited long enough. I really wanted to do it. It did, however, mean that I can't play a cannon this turn, even with the Maria bonus. But that's okay. I can just rebuild my swordsman and still be strongest, so not a big deal. I decided to take a cavalryman for a potential age 3 tactics. And because there wasn't that much else on the road that I wanted, we'll see what else I take One thing is the scientific method. It'll be a very late scientific method if I get it going. However, there are, there is Marie Curie and Einstein, so a little bit of reason, and also just in general, obviously, like, for science protection is alright, but it's not necessarily what you want to be. So I just felt in general it was like potentially a way for me to get something of my opponents right, get some science protection going. And it's only one civil action too. Maybe I didn't have anything else I particularly wanted to take other than this urban growth. Engineering Genius, not clear. It's never clear when you'll be able to use the H2 Engineering Genius if it's an H3, if it's not an H2 Wonder, because H3 Wonders you usually want to complete at the end of the game when the H2 is discarded, so. Yeah, I think I didn't want to take the statue because my rocks are really pressed right now. So, I could have maybe taken the military theory, but I have the strategy already. Even if I wanted to cut it for my opponents, there's a second copy coming. It didn't feel worth it doing for 3 civil actions. So I think this turn is probably the best one. I guess the reason not to take these cards is if I increase my population instead. However, there's a reason not to increase my population, and that is there's this early red cross in the row. And remember what I said previously, that I'm going to have to be deliberate in how I play H3 if I want to make up the culture deficit. This red cross is certainly one way to do that. I have a lot of food saved up. Now, it is true that food is very useful with Maria, so you're going to be sacrificing that aspect of things by taking the red cross. However, the red cross gives you a lot of culture, not for rocks, only for food, and I'm kind of suffering for rocks right now, whereas I have a lot of food. So I think red cross is kind of exactly what I need, especially since I have the masonry to finish the stages quicker. So I think it's definitely right to at least potentially set up for a red cross in case I want to take it. And that's why I wanted to spend the barest possible amount of food to stay out of corruption. Well, I had to increase my population to rebuild my swordsman regardless, so. Anyway. I draw an Impact of Wonder, Seedable Impact, Loss of Sovereignty, and a bonus card. Nice for the territory seeded. Gens reveals a popularization of science, a relatively even event. And Gens, not surprisingly, takes Darwin for some extra culture, is able to finish Ocean Liner service, and thanks to the revolutionary idea and the reserves and the architecture, is also able to build a library to get more science and more culture all in the same turn. This seems like a very strong turn for Gens. I think it's not because they're the weakest. Instead, they play the with nationalism, which lets them build 2 cavalrymen pretty cheaply. They're definitely strong. On the other hand, it also costs them a lot of science. They're kind of suffering a bit for science right now, and they would really like this military theory, which I believe they're about to take. Yes, so this does mean they'll have to be on 2 military actions for a while longer. Definitely not where you want to be in H3, especially. So that's kind of unfortunate. I do think this Statue of Liberty makes sense, though, because they're short on science. They'll probably need a rock sink, and they won't have another free population soon. So they definitely do need a rock sink, so I think the Wonder makes sense. I see the Impact of Wonders. It's going to be, I think, a neutral to positive impact for me, and I wanted to, I think, specifically reveal this card, the Historic, so I could bid on it. Well, unfortunately, it ends up being a little unfortunate, though, because I'm 1 point shy of being able to win it just for 1 swordsman on my bonus card. Instead, I actually have to win it for, I have to put in another swordsman. Yeah, so I'm 1 point shy to win it with a swordsman and a bonus card, or with just the 2 swordsmen by itself. So I have to win it with a total colonization of 8 when I only had to pay 6. So that was unfortunate. However, again, with me being in the culture deficit and no super clear way to get culture going anytime soon, I thought that the extra 11 culture from the colony might be more important than it normally is. The happy faces also help, obviously, but I also think the culture here just is an easy way for me to get some culture over my opponents when there's not another clear way of doing it. Seemed right to me. As for this one, I definitely didn't have to take the Red Cross. One option might have been to build a movie. Thanks to my urban growth and my masonry, I will have just enough rocks to be able to build a movie this turn. However, that would also require me to delay the mine upgrade, and it's just kind of a lot of resources to build the movie. I was kind of thinking I might have some war opportunities too, with L-Tank only being on 2 military actions, with Gens being on this H1 tactic, so I didn't really want to commit to the movie so quickly, really. So that, in the end, is why I think I decided to take the Red Cross. I am also able to build a cannon with the Maria bonus, as well as finally play my defensive army tactic. That makes me to rebuild my strength. That leaves me with one civil action left, and here I think I make a mistake. Instead of upgrading mine, I decided to build 2 stages of the Red Cross. If I'm being honest, I really can't remember at all why I did this. There might have been a reason, but I really, frankly, can't think of one. It just seems clearly better to upgrade than mine. There's no reason to build the stages this turn. Gens will build 1 stage. L-Tank does not have enough food to build a stage. That's another reason why I took the Red Cross, because only one of my opponents can build a stage. Obviously, I miss short on food to finish the Red Cross this turn anyway. So, yeah, I think that this was a very clear mistake, and I should have upgraded the mine this turn instead. I draw 2 impacts, potentially suitable, impact of progress and impact of competition, as well as a hybrid war. Notable cards. Jens builds the stage of my Red Cross, builds a second library to get even more science and culture going, takes the second copy of military theory, so both of my opponents have a copy of that now, as well as tanks, so they have their full suite of military techs for Age 3 tactics. They also, interestingly, decide to take these 2 technologies, the oil and the computers, as well as Churchill. Now, Churchill I can definitely see being good for them, especially since they're a little struggling on military right now. However, taking these 2 technologies, it seems pretty unlikely, definitely, that both of them will be played. Maybe not even one of them. They have a lot of techs in their hand already. They're running out of hand space. There's no way they're going to be able to play all these techs. So by plugging their handful of these techs, Jins is playing a pretty dangerous game in terms of hand size. So I think that that shouldn't have been done. Maybe taking the endowment should have been considered. I mean, maybe it wouldn't have been... It's a little hard to say. It's a little hard to judge at this point, you know, whether Jens could be below culture to L-Tank or me, but it's at least a card that you can play to get out of your hand again. I understand Jens wanted to take the Churchill, and for that reason didn't have the civil action to take one of these yellow cards, but still, this feels bad. Even floating actions maybe would be better than doing this. Or potentially maybe finding a way to take the Hollywood instead, although without theaters, Hollywood probably isn't good for them, so never mind. L-Tank Seeds reveals an immigration, doesn't hit anyone. L-Tank takes that first Air Forces, finishes upgrading their farms finally, and takes a patriotism and her reserves. So L-Tank, for understandable reasons, seems to be worried about the military situation and looks to be taking cards to fix that issue, which I think is smart. I want to see them at the weakest. I decided to see the impact of progress. Definitely seems like should at least be a neutral impact for me, but maybe even a positive one, because I'm going to be taking Einstein, as we'll see on my turn. But we'll resolve the event first. Is the strategic territory. Unfortunately, with all the resources I had put into previous territories, I wasn't really in a position to bid much for it, especially as we'll see with the turn I'm about to do. It's going to take up all of my resources, so that's why I only bid that amount. I think I bid enough. I think I bid 5 because I was pretty confident my opponents would bid more than that based on how they bid on previous colonies. So I didn't actually want to win it for 5, although I think I could have, thanks to Maria. But it was mostly just to make sure my opponents couldn't win it for too cheap. In the end, L-Tank wins it. At least they have to spend 2 units on it, which isn't too bad. As for me, so the Red Cross, we can see, is going to do a pretty good job of catching me up to my opponents, but I still have less cultural protection than them. So that was still worrisome. As for a war, the problem there was I didn't have an H3 tactic yet. I don't know if I'm going to have Air Forces. There's only 1 copy left. Probably better odds than not I'll get it because I played before Jens, but I can't know that for sure. I also only have the hybrid war with me. In addition, Jens took Churchill, so it might be hard to get a big war against them. L-Tank also has the Air Forces, has these yellow cards. So overall, a war plan, I felt that like going all in for war right now just seemed pretty risky. And like it might work out if, you know, everything lines up for me, but it wasn't clear to me that it would. So I felt that instead of going for a war plan, maybe going for a more peaceful path was a more likely way for me to win this game. Because again, I'm going to be pretty close in culture to my opponents actually after finishing Red Cross. So that leaves a peaceful path looking a lot more feasible. So for that reason, after I finally upgraded that second mine and finished my Red Cross, I decided to take Einstein. I'm able to get Einstein with Multimedia, obviously an extremely strong combination. Just in general, it also helps me with my science, which is a little low at this point. I also have that impact of progress I see in my deck, so the extra science I get from Einstein will be very useful for that. So for all those reasons, he's available for one simple action. I think Einstein in general is one of the best H3 leaders, so I'm pretty confident in this play. I of course can't build the multimedia this turn, but I can take an efficient upgrade. Even though it'll be a late third mine upgrade, I think with the efficient upgrade plus potentially Silk Road, it should still be worth it to do. And I spend the Maria resource to build a second cannon. On my turn, I draw 2 bonus cards, so some colony bids perhaps, as well as an impact of technology. This was definitely a very lucky draw. You know, immediately rewarded for taking Einstein Multimedia, so that's always nice to see. Jens elects Churchill, uses his military ability immediately to build a tank, to upgrade to a tank, as well as take some yellow cards. Unfortunately, we can see their cost of taking these techs is their hand is full and they have no choice but to float their final civil action. Tank Seeds reveals the terrorism, so I guess I didn't really talk about this when I built the Red Cross, but obviously one weakness of doing that is it means that I might not be able to win the terrorism. So that is something that I did think of at the time, was the terrorism with the Red Cross. But I just felt that the Red Cross was too powerful for me to pass up doing it. And in addition, as you can see, I deliberately avoided building urban buildings because I knew the terrorism was coming. So for that reason, I only lose the Serena, which isn't really a big deal. Jens has to lose a journalism, which is a much bigger deal. And I think that even if the terrorism hasn't been revealed on Tank's turn, yeah, then they would have been ahead of me in culture. So then I could have seeded, and then probably, even if terrorism hadn't been revealed, I could have built a multimedia and still maybe been lowest in culture, although actually that would have been pretty close by then. So kind of a risky game I was playing, but again, I just felt the Red Cross was too good for me to pass up. Anyway, Eltank is able to finish the Statue of Liberty and build a second drama to get 15 culture production going, which is quite a lot. They also take some urban growths. These are good cards, to get me wrong, but with Eltank still being on 2 military actions, unfortunately there's no revolutionary ideas Eltank was able to take, so it's looking pretty unlikely that Eltank will be able to get both air forces and military theory. So military is looking like, with these 2 military actions, are a huge strain on Eltank at the moment. So for that reason, I think instead of these urban growths, maybe taking their patriotism would have been better, to have just a second patriotism, again, mainly just for that military action, to make them safer against potential wars. With Jens having Churchill, especially, wars seem pretty likely at the current point in time. I see that imperative competition. I think I'm going to take the pro sports this turn. So I just felt that, you know, I wanted to seed why I was strongest, and it felt like a potentially good impact for me. You know, maybe I could have done Crime Wave instead, but also Jens has Churchill, so Crime Wave is also pretty risky, so I just went with the impact. So the event I revealed was an unexpected one, the international agreement, and that's one I had to think about for a while, because obviously international agreement is very strong, but especially like this late in the game, giving up your political action is an extremely severe cost. It means that because it looks like the next turn will likely be the last turn in H3. You can't know for sure, but you know, we all have a lot of civil action, so it's kind of seeming that way. Meaning that if I take the international agreement this turn, I will not be able to declare war. However, you know, we can see the second copy of Air Forces is not on the row. I felt that without Air Forces, it was unlikely. You know, I never drew any Age 3 tactic, unfortunately. So just without Air Forces, without an Age 3 tactic, it just felt really unlikely that I would be able to get a substantial war going. Now, obviously, giving up the political phase also means I can't see an impact. However, I am able to take the United Nations wonder with it. And that's ultimately why I decided to go with it. The United Nations basically gives you an extra political action, right? So I felt, so in that sense, I'm like regaining the political action I spent on the international agreement. And it's obviously just, you know, I was thinking, what might I take on the international agreement? You know, my hand's kind of full. But once I saw, you know, the potential value of taking the United Nations, I'm also able to take a very useful civil service, not only for a technology with Einstein, and just in itself, you know, with putting me from 6 to 8 civil actions, but it will also give me 6 culture from the impact of progress I seeded. So the international agreement is just giving me 2 very powerful cards, this wonder for extra culture, the civil service for reasons already stated. So that's why I decided it was worth giving up my political action, even though giving up my political action is certainly a very severe cost at this point in the game. I increased my population one last time with Maria, before replacing her with Einstein. And now it is time to build that multimedia, putting me up to 10 science production. With my remaining 3 civil actions, I decided to take the pro sports. Obviously, another benefit of the national agreement, it knocked the pro sports down from 2 to 1. One reason that I think I suited the impact of competition was because I expected to take the pro sports. Just in general, a very strong card for a number of different impacts. Competition, obviously, architecture, happiness, maybe strength a little bit. There's just so much it does for you. I think it's like maybe the card in the game that helps you with the most different types of impacts. Variety too. You know, I mean, I can still get variety with Bid and Circuses, but it just gives you so much. Anyway, with my remaining 2 civil actions, I decided to take the patriotism. Jens was looking potentially pretty scary with Churchill, with all these military techs, with these 2 copies of reserves. So I just felt, you know, better safe than sorry. I could have maybe taken the mechanized agriculture as a cheap tech and to get some more population going. Thanks to the Red Cross, my population is a little thin at the moment. But again, I was just worried about gens. My only other resource yellow card is the efficient upgrade. This does also mean that I am delaying my mine upgrade another turn, so that's a substantial cost to be sure. But I just felt everything else I did this turn was more important. And I think I figured at this rate, even with me having efficient upgrades, maybe I just want to destroy this bronze mine to get an extra free population to put into military or something instead of upgrading it. Just got the back. Oh yeah, and I spend my last Maria resource. I draw an impact of colonies. This is another very lucky draw for me. I think I'm the only... Well, I think I has 1, but yeah, I have a lot more colonies than my opponents do, so definitely, this is definitely another very fortunate draw for me. And again, you know, normally I wouldn't be able to seed both of these after taking international agreement, but with the United Nations, I kind of will be able to seed them both. So well as a modern army, a little bit late in a raid. Jen's used to the Churchill ability again, and is able to build a cannon. Takes a rev idea, builds a second cannon, and shows they have the mechanized army tactic, so Gens is definitely looking quite scary right now. They're also leaving themselves with potentially enough science for a Air Forces. Unfortunately, they are still only on 4 military actions, so maybe Air Forces wouldn't be that good for them anyway, and military theory would be even better. They also take a wonder, which seems right. Tank seeds. Reveals a vast territory. It's pretty late, so I wasn't willing to put too much into it. So I think, let's see, what is a bit of 8? So that was, yeah, that was 1 swordsman and one swordsman and my 2 bonus cards. So yeah, I really wasn't willing to put that much into it. It didn't feel that good for me. So I mainly just wanted to check up the price a little bit in case one of my opponents bid. And L-Tank does indeed end up losing, I mean, only 1 swordsman to be sure. But like, again, with L-Tank, you know, only being on 2 military actions, Gens is definitely looking threatening right now. Any military you lose will be costly. Anyway, Altank does choose Marlena, definitely the strongest possible leader, I think, for them in their position. Meaning military and having dramas. They also play the Air Forces this turn, and they played the Patriot system to build an Air Force. Yeah, this does unfortunately mean that even with the revolutionary idea, they will sadly be exactly one science short of playing the military theory this turn. They also empty their hand notably by playing the Napoleonic army tactic. Looks like they're setting up more for rockets than for the military theory. But what that means is they have to use the patriotism this turn. I guess they use the patriotism this turn, but they also use it on the military actions. So that makes it fine. They did. So that means they didn't. There wasn't really a reason to save it for next turn. On my turn, I don't have a political action thanks to international agreement. Instead, I play the civil service. I do take the second copy of Air Forces. I was strongly suspecting Jens was going to war, and I just wanted to make sure... Basically, I wanted to make sure Jens were L-Tank and not me. I mean, L-Tank obviously only has these 2 military actions, so it's going to be... And none of their yellow cards give them military rocks. So pretty much all they're going to be able to do is like build 1, maybe 2 units next turn. So it shouldn't be too much to seem more threatening than L-Tank, but I do think the Air Forces is a very important way to seem more threatening than L-Tank. Basically, I felt if I'm able to threaten getting 2 armies and 2 Air Forces next turn, that should be enough for Jens to war L-Tank instead. I take the satellites both as a way to get a little extra strength potentially, but also I think, and as a Einstein tech, but is also very good for my impact of progress that I had seeded previously. And with my last 2 civil actions, I take the engineering genius. I could have taken the military build up, and I debated between them for a while, and I was doing war calculations. But again, I don't need the military build up to get 2 armies and 2 air forces. I just felt 2 armies, 2 air forces, plus satellites. Well, I actually can't play satellites plus air forces, but yeah, I just thought 2 armies plus 2 air forces should be enough to deter Jens, and I didn't need the military build up. So instead, I should take the engineering genius in preparation for finishing my wonder next turn. I draw an impact of strength, probably won't seed, as well as 2 armed interventions. Age 4 begins. And Jens does war, and it's not against me. I'm also, you know, I guess I've actually managed to catch up in culture at this point. So I think the main reason was just I'm threatening more strength than L-Tank. So Jens plays the military theory and is able to get, 2 full armies going for 52 strength, which, you know, is not a lot. You know, this is what happens when you don't have air forces, but it's going to be enough to win the war at least. And then they take some cards. Looks like they're setting up to play democracy next turn as a way to get some culture going without having to spend rocks, which makes sense to me. The engineering genius may have also been a small denial against Jens, but it's mainly just good for me. L-Tank is at least able to get 2 armies going thanks to getting the rockets and Marlena copying the rockets. Unfortunately, they're still losing the war, but at least it's not by very much. And then they take some other cards too. So the last turn in the game, impact of colonies and impact of tech are definitely the 2 best impacts for me. The reason I see the impact of colonies is because there's no Age 2 events left, so my opponents can't possibly win any more colonies. However, on their turns, they will each be able to play 1 technology to get +4 for impact of technologies. So that's why I want to reveal impact of technologies with my United Nations before they're able to increase it, and seed my impact of colonies that they are not able to get better on their turns. I reveal my impact of wonders. That's a pretty even impact all around. So I play my satellites and my sports. I'm able to finish my UN. I obviously play those techs before finishing the UN and revealing my impact of technology. So my impact of technology gives me 8 points against both my opponents. So the UN is basically equivalent to 24 points, which is definitely not bad. I am able now to build an arena by using that efficient upgrade I took all the way back then, so I ended up not using it in my mind at all, but instead I'm building a very cheap pro sports. I know there's an impact of competition in my deck, so that helps me with that. It also helps me, again, with impact of happiness, variety, just so many impacts this helps with. Architecture. And with my last civil action, I increase my population, and I build a swordsman. And you'll notice the way I've set my turn, I end with 36 strength, with my 2 bonus cards that I can defend for 6, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, meaning I have just barely enough to defend against an aggression from gens. So I did make sure to play my turn in a way that ensures I can defend. And Jens takes 10 culture from L Tank, and we can see Jens doesn't even try an aggression against me. Instead, they try the guaranteed occupy against L Tank. They will build a 3rd lab, play democracy, and then finish those fast food chains for 23 culture. So that's actually 1 less culture than the UN gave me. And L Tank just upgrades some computers, probably a sign of the impacts they've seeded, and builds a farm, probably not also a sign of the impacts they've seeded. So now before the final impacts, we take a look at the culture, and we've seen that despite the fact that I had been behind in culture for most of the game, thanks to Einstein, my two Age 3 wonders, including the Red Cross, as well as, getting a bit of extra culture protection from the multimedia, I am actually only 1 culture behind Jens right now, and 20 ahead of L Tank. So it's looking like L Tank is definitely weakest right now, and they'll probably finish 3rd, but 5 impacts in the deck, they could certainly switch things around, depending on what impacts they are. But I also know that I have the impact of colonies in the deck that's good for me. So I felt that going in the final impacts, there's definitely a good chance that I might end up finishing first, but we'll see what happens. The first impact is the impact of architecture. This I didn't know about. Looks like it was probably seeded by L Tank, but it does give me 2 points against Jens, putting me temporarily in the lead by exactly 1. Next is the impact of competition. This I seeded, unfortunately, it ends up being a negative impact for me, at least against Jens, giving Jens 6 points against me, 3 total if you include the seeding bonus. So ended up being not a good impact for me, but at least not horrible. I'm now 5 points behind Jens. The next, however, is my impact of colonies. This gives me 12 points against Jens, only 6 against L Tank, but I'm mostly concerned about Jens right now. Now I am 7 ahead of Jens with only 2 impacts left to go. So that's good news for me. The next impact is the impact of agriculture. This was almost certainly suited by L Tank, which gives them best. However, it does at least give me 4 more culture against Jens. Jens with the ocean liner service had less food production than me, so I am now 11 points ahead of Jens with only 1 impact left. So high hopes now, and especially since I know what the last impact of it is the impact of progress. This gives me only 4 points against Jens, a lot more against L Tank, but that's definitely more than enough, and I end up being able to win this game by 15 points. This was kind of an interesting game to go back and look at. I think that I definitely made a number of mistakes. I played just a little loosey-goosey, especially in Age 1. I don't think any of the errors I made were, like, truly glaring or anything, but going back through, there was definitely some plays that were not ideal, that I should have probably thought more on, or looked at different sides of. And then, of course, there was that play when I took the Red Cross that I didn't upgrade the mine and instead spent on the Red Cross, which, if you can think of a good reason to do that, let me know, because right now, I really can't think of a reason. So I definitely made some mistakes this in retrospect. It wasn't my best played game on that score. On the other hand, I think on a more strategic level, I'm pretty proud of how I played Age 3. I think going into Age 3, the game was definitely not looking good for me. I mean, I did have some things going for me. It's not like it was hopeless. Obviously, I ended up winning. But, like, I did feel, even in retrospect, and also at the time, that I was behind and in 3rd place going into Age 3. And as I said, I was in a position where I couldn't just coast and win. I needed to, like, deliberately figure out ways that I could get culture. And I'm happy with how I did that, taking advantage of the Red Cross when it appeared, taking advantage of the international agreement to get that United Nations. I feel that, again, aside from that obvious, like, not upgrading the mine play, I think my age 3 play was quite good all around. You know, that turn before Jens declared the war, making sure to prepare myself. You know, I could have, you know, for example, built a second multimedia that turn if I had wanted to. But, you know, noticing that Jens was preparing for a war, so making sure that I, you know, was threatening enough that Jens would war L-Tank instead. Ended up, you know, winning me this game, along with other decisions I made. So, even though I also got fortunate, obviously, in some score, the impact of technology and the impact of colonies were both very strong impacts for me. I am still overall satisfied with, you know, maybe not, you know, that one turn when I didn't upgrade the mine, but aside from that, I think my age 3 play this game was quite good, and I managed to come back from probably being third to winning, which I am proud of myself for. So, that's it for this game. I will be doing videos on my Survivors Cup run for however long it might last. I have a few other videos planned. I also played an Australian Open game that I'm going to show you all at some point soon. I'm also probably going to show you my Intermezzo games. We'll see, though, because the next round of the World Championships already started, so we'll see how these things go. But I definitely want to at least do Survivors Cup and Australian Open and World Championship. We'll see if I have time for any of my other tournaments. Until then, though, as always, let me know if you have any comments on either my gameplay or my video making. I'm always looking to improve on both scores. I hope you enjoy this video, and I hope to see you in the next one.